Shabbat Shalom and good morning. We are recording from the Rabbi Chill Sanctuary on Wednesday, September 10th. This is showing on Shabbat, September 13th. And of course, the first thing you'll notice is that there are 4 of us, not 5 of us, because, thank God, Aliza and Solomon were blessed with a beautiful baby girl last Friday. And she is on maternity leave and will be back after her leave is over in several months. So in the meantime, we just want to send lots of love to Aliza and Solomon, and to Eder and to Sadia, their new daughter. And the 4 of us will continue to be in wonderful dialogue and in dialogue with our congregation. So, dear colleagues, last week we talked about Icarus. Icarus was this young man who did not heed his father Daedalus's advice. His father said, don't soar too high, don't fly too high to the sun. And he flew too high, too close to the sun, and his wings melted and he died. And we talked about last week this painting of Peter Bruegel from the Netherlands in the 16th century, which shows, for the most part, that the 3 peasants who were nearby when Icarus fell from the sky and died did not see, did not care, did not know. That's what we talked about last week. We talked about who are the peasants, who is Icarus. Okay. In the Talmud class on Shabbat, one of our learners, David Rosenson, added a coda to the story that I hadn't known about, that we hadn't discussed. But when he did it, it was just so filled with pathos. It was so filled with pathos, and it was so close. It was so close to anybody who has ever loved. Anybody who's ever loved has felt this, which is that while the rest of the world did not see and did not care, his father Daedalus did see and did care and did know. And his father went to the place where Icarus fell into the sea and picked him up and gathered him and buried him. And in the packet, there's a text from Ovid that tells that story, and there is a painting that shows the pathos of Daedalus. What we're going to do today is kind of think about what it would be like to be the father of Icarus, whose beloved son just makes an unwise decision, whose beloved son is his own worst enemy, whose beloved son makes a decision that the father knows is unwise. The father has pattern recognition and says, sweetheart, don't do that. It's not good for you. And the son doesn't listen and dies. And now the father is left holding the bag. We're going to see very much a Jewish version of that in the story of David and Absalom, where Absalom is a son of David and rebels against David and dies, and David is absolutely grief-stricken. And we're going to talk about, what do you do where this is showing on the 13th, that night is Slichot. So many of us carry into the high holidays pain when the people that we love most are their own worst enemies. And what do we do when the people we love most are their own worst enemies? They make decisions that are unwise. We know they're unwise. We can't tell them. They don't want to hear. They don't want our prescriptions. They don't want our answers. They make their own decisions. And we're like the father of Icarus or King David afterwards. And how do we understand that, and what is a helpful response to that? So, on that cheery note, let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'ha'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu, u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, v'nihiyeh anachnu v'tze'atzaeinu v'tze'atzei amcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai hamalamed Torah li'amo Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. I want to jump into our content by inviting you to take a look at the painting of Daedalus bearing Icarus, year 1605, by Carlos Saraceni. This is page 2 of the handout. And I want to ask you kind of the question that the Bible scholar Peter Pitzela invited us to think about. What was Isaac thinking about as he went to the mountaintop? What is Daedalus thinking about? What's going on in his mind and in his heart and in his soul as he collects his son Icarus from the water.
I think it's almost like Aaron and his two when his two sons die. He's like it's Ve'idom. He's just like totally silent. There's no words for it. There's no in a sense the emotion is so overwhelming that isn't even emotion. It's just so painful and so deadening at that moment.
So, and that's so interesting. Vayidom Aharon, the silence, there's no words. Ein milim, as Israelis say today, also often.
Yes.
There's no words. What almost always follows there's no words is words anyway, often poetry anyway. But here, there's no words, and he's silent. I want to pause and just, the Absalom story is related in the text. I want to just go to the end of the Absalom story. So, Absalom fights a civil war against his father, and his father's commander is Joab, and he tells him, please don't kill my son. He is my son. Yes, he's rebelling against me, but he's my son. And then Absalom has this very long hair, and the hair gets strung up on a tree, and the horse or the mule, actually, that he's on continues, and he's left suspended from the tree with his hair caught in the branches. And then Joab and his soldiers stab him to death, and he's dead. And then at the very end, this is on page 10 of the handout, the king asks the Cushite, who is the messenger that's telling them, is my boy Absalom safe? And the Cushite replied, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rose against you to do you harm fare like that young man, meaning he's dead. The king was shaken. He went up to the upper chamber of the gateway and wept, moaning these words as he went. My son Absalom, oh my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh Absalom, my son, my son. And I wanted to just juxtapose, Dan, your interpretation of Daedalus being utterly silent. There are no words. And David is not silent. He says words. Mostly what he says is, oh, my son Absalom, I wish I had died instead of you. How do you think about their two different reactions, wordless pain and pain with words?
So I think that although the stories have many similarities, there are some differences as well. In the first case, when we see the picture, and he's in silence, I think that there must be something about Daedalus that is asking himself, did I do the right thing? Did I raise this boy in the right way, or was it worth it for me to do the wings and to build the wings? What could have happened if I hadn't done that? Some kind of regret feeling and saying,
what did I do wrong?
Exactly.
What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong to raise a boy who doesn't listen? What did I do wrong to create those feathered wings with wax that just were an open invitation for him to disobey?
Right. And in the case
he's dead because of me.
Right. And in the case of Absalom, to me, it's a little different because he's declaring war to his own father. That's completely different. They end in the same way. They both die.
Right.
And they both cause a lot of pain to the parents, but very different.
Yeah, and yet the backstory, you could very easily see King David taking the blame for that backstory as well, because Tamar is raped and by her brother, one of David's other children, right? And David himself should have raised Amnon to the kind of proper way to be in the world, but instead we know the echo of history. David, of course, was with Bathsheba, and all of that background of the way in which he walked in this world as an example may have rubbed off on his children, and you see these open brackets continue to affect the next generation of pain after pain after pain.
But you agree with me that the stories are very different, because in the first case,
I mean, I would have said the reason.
In the first case, the father, the only thing that wanted is the kid to fly.
Yeah, I would have said the opposite, right? I would have said, if Daedalus is feeling guilty in some sense, almost he tried to free them. He
Right.
gave the instructions. He did the things. He could have expected that his son might have risen to that. David, it seems, has a much more complex picture
Yeah.
going on in the
Now,
background.
what you both have in common in your words of the story, your analysis, is this quality of parents, especially whose kids make self-defeating decisions, self-destructive decisions, to say, "What did I do wrong? Somehow it must be my fault. I didn't raise them right." Um, what do you think about that instinct? I mean, it certainly is. It certainly is. We've all heard it many times. And what do you think about that instinct? Is it a helpful instinct? Is it not a helpful instinct? Michelle, if somebody comes to you and says, "My adult child did something really dumb and self-destructive, it must be my fault. I did something wrong," how do you engage that voice?
I find that to be an unhelpful voice because it doesn't enable us to change, right? So to the extent that there's some kind of karma going on in the David story, or at least according to our rabbis, they would
Right.
say, this is midah keneged midah. This is sort of that chain of karma running through life, and as the father, so goes the children. I would say it's a tragic meme, but it is not a helpful pastoral meme.
And what would be, let me ask you this question. Here, let's say somebody is going into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and their heart is filled with sorrow because people they love, often children, but not only children, not limited to children. It could be siblings, it could be parents, it could be friends, it could be grandchildren. Somebody you love is doing something unwise in the sense that it's not productive of that person's own aspirations. And they won't hear you and can't hear you. And they make these decisions and they do the deeds, and it has the regrettable consequences. And the person who loves them goes into the holidays with a heavy heart. What is, in any of your views, a helpful response to that heavy heart?
Look, I think you have to. You're kind of moving on two levels here, right? Because one is, are there things we could have done better, should have done better? Could we improve ourselves in a way that maybe if given a chance next time, we can be better? And those are all questions. And then there's the second question you're asking is about, it's not about what a parent put into a child or what a spouse puts into or any kind of action that they have done or didn't do. It's actually just the child themselves or the person themselves making decisions about their life that you disagree with or that you feel are not helpful to them. And I actually think they're two different case studies. So which one would you like to dig into?
So, not the one where the parent's own bad example has somehow set the stage for the child doing what the parent did. Not David was promiscuous and inappropriate with women, therefore his son Amnon is, and therefore David's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he could say, "Chatati, I shouldn't have been promiscuous with women." What kind of example is that? Not that. I'm talking about the case where, much more like the Daedalus case, like you mean well, you do your best, you invest every love and opportunity into your loved one, say an adult child, and they still do something that is self-destructive. They're still their own worst enemies, not because you role modeled something untoward, but their own discretion. Is there a way to get to peace with that? Do you just live with that pain? Daedalus surely has to live with that pain. King David, there's a picture of him painted by Chagall as well, has to live with this pain. What else do you got in your repertoire besides live with this pain?
So to me, taking a balcony view of the whole thing, and if I look back at my life, my own life, to me was much easier to be Icarus than to be Daedalus. That's his pronunciation?
Yeah.
Daedalus. Why is that? I don't recall my parents ever told me, "Don't do that, let me give you an advice." And I'm sure they were with panic in so many situations about the fear of my decisions. I can tell you every minute that I told my boys, don't do this, don't listen to me, don't try, because it's part of life. We are young, we are youthful, we are full of energy, full of dreams, and we want to create our own path. And as parents, it's the opposite. You know, we see these little things so precious, so gorgeous growing. We want to protect them all the time. And, you know, it reminds me of the song, the famous song, Uf Gozal, you know, Arik Einstein. Uf Gozal, Hatochet Hashamayim. You know, little bird, you know, sky, you know, go through the sky, but don't forget there are eagles, Nesher Bashamayim. There are eagles that could, you know, be careful. And, you know, I would say that it's so easy to say it, but very difficult to do it, that we as parents, in the case of son and parents, we have to let it go so many times.
Yeah.
Let it go.
one-
Yeah.
one of-
Dan,
one of-
what's your
yeah.
wisdom on this?
Yeah, I'm with Eliza on this. You think about all the times that, you know, that you want to set the right tone, set the right model, but also the idea that every one of our children are their own person, and we have to be able to find that time and place where we step away from them. We give them their advice, and we know that kids are not going to listen to our advice. We know that the way that, I'm assuming that this is true for me, and it may be true for all of us, that the way that we become the people that we become is because we make our own mistakes, and we find our own, as Eli said, our own path in the world. These two stories, though, it's really interesting because they're cautionary about children not listening to their parents, and they do make mistakes, and those mistakes become fatal. God willing, that's not true for all of us. We let our kids grow and become the people that they're going to become by stepping away and letting them do that and making their own mistakes so they can learn on their own. And and it's kind of like, it's always like the Monday morning quarterbacking. By the time our children reach closer to adulthood, 30, 40, whatever, they've now realized that all the things that you told them when they were 10 and 15 and 20, that their parents actually had something reasonable and important to say, but we're not willing to do that, as Eli said, because we're youthful. We have to find our way, find our own place in the world.
To me, what's so particularly tragic about the Absalom story are the echoes of Jacob's children and the rape of Dinah, and the history just going back against itself with these bad decisions that are made again and again and again. And I think one of the hard things at this season is when so many of us, our children are, the people around us are caught in loops that just keep returning. And each of us has that challenge of that piece of work that we just can't do. And to me, it's helpful to think about my own work that's hard for me when I think about what I want my children to do, or what I think my family should do, or my friends or other people should do, and to find the humility to realize that many of us are caught in our own cycles, and that can give us more compassion for the cycle that they're in.
So I want to ask each of you, as you're thinking about what we carry and the pain that we carry for the decisions of the people we love, what a spiritual practice might be, or what a prayer might be, that could help center us and anchor us and give us the strength to do that kind of reflection. And what came up for me is the Serenity prayer. So, Michelle, it's on page 11 of the handout, as the materials from ChatGPT offer. It's from Reinhold Niebuhr, an American Protestant theologian who wrote it in the 30s. That's itself very interesting. We could talk about that. But in this prayer, the Serenity prayer, he asks actually for three things. It's called the Serenity prayer, but he doesn't ask just for serenity. He asks for serenity, he asks for courage, and he asks for wisdom. So I'll be very curious, your response to the prayer. Does it land? Does it help? Is it a prayer that you have ever prayed? Is it a prayer that you would pray? And also, what do you think about the order of serenity, courage, and wisdom?
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Great. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. So before I ask you for your own personal reaction to this prayer, do you think this prayer would be helpful to Daedalus?
I think it would land on deaf ears.
Deaf ears, why is that then?
You can't give people advice when they're in the moment of their deepest sorrow.
Mm.
So maybe 10 years later,
Okay.
this might resonate. So that's one.
Okay.
Thing. Yeah.
Then what about, fair enough, the timing is the art of life, and you can't comfort the dead while the dead lie before them. The Pirkei Avot says that explicitly. Thank you for that, Dan. What about you? When you think about the people in your life who make decisions that are perhaps self-destructive or not in their own best interest and you can't do anything about it, does this prayer help you?
The prayer looks beautiful, all right, and sounds beautiful. To me, the amazing line here is the third one, all right, because it's so hard, it's so blurry at times to know when to step back and when to accept things, and say, is this something I can really change or not? Is this something that I should keep fighting for? So the blurry line it's what's really challenging here in the wisdom to know the difference.
Look, this is a prayer that has helped arguably millions since the 1930s to now. It is a cornerstone of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. It is something that is said with true intention to try to change and grow by so many people. And so I wouldn't want to argue. It's a prayer that clearly works for many people. And Elias, to your point, that the crux of the whole thing is the wisdom to know the difference, because so often we think that the things we can have to accept are things we just have to accept, when actually we might be able to have some influence. And sometimes we think that there are things we can change that really we should accept. And that discernment really is one of those hardest pieces of life, which is what brings me, I think it's an incomplete prayer when you're talking about the people in our lives. To me, I mean, I've stood in front of this ark many, many times and prayed the words that Moses prayed for Miriam, which is just, God, heal her, right? I don't know. I don't know what the direction is. I don't know what she needs. I don't know how that's going to work. But I have to articulate this basic hope and prayer that my loved one finds a healing that I'm not sure it's up to me to discern.
Yeah. So I want to just thank you guys for your comments. I want to note a few things about this. First of all, you all talk about the important thing is wisdom, discernment, knowing what can be changed, what can't be changed. And of course, that's true. And yet, a couple things. First, the prayer is called the Serenity Prayer. It's not called the Wisdom Prayer. It's not called the Discernment Prayer. It's called the Serenity Prayer. And, as Micha Goodman has taught, and as we all know, beginnings are really important. Like the opening gambit, the first quarter is a really important quarter. The opening is really important. And the first prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And so the prayer posits a landscape which is about humility, which is, yeah, you may love your loved one, but there's going to be a ton of stuff you cannot change, especially as they get older, and so the main thing, yeah, discernment, yeah, wisdom, yeah, of course. But the main thing, if I got one ask with this genie in the bottle, it's serenity. It's accept that a lot of stuff that causes me a lot of pain, I cannot change. And I'm wondering, and hence it is called the Serenity Prayer. So I'm wondering what you think about that basic posture, the name and the first line, which is about serenity.
So I have a question for you, actually. Have you encountered moments in your life that you have said to yourself, I cannot change this and I have to let it go, and then 3 months later, you revisit the idea. Maybe there is something I can change.
So no, I'll tell you, for me, most of the stuff that causes me pain and has caused me pain are things that I cannot change. And I wish that I could fulfill this prayer. But the word that comes up, it's not included in the packet, but it's the word that comes up for me. Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote a poem with the great title, Unresigned. Unresigned. I'm unresigned. And for the most part, the stuff that really causes me pain, that breaks me, I feel unresigned about. And I wish that I could be serene about it. And in fact, I want to offer up that I think this prayer has the order and the priorities just right. Because I think most things in the world, and we have to come to talk about the assessment of this whole prayer in a minute, but I think most of the things that cause us pain, not all, to be sure, not all, but most, certainly about the world. Think about, any national or international issue. Think about Israel, think about Gaza, think about the war, etc. We can't change any of that. We can't change any of that. So too in our own country. We can't change that. And mostly when our loved ones make decisions, we can't change that. So I think this emphasis on God grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, that feels deeply, deeply wise to me. And my own spiritual work is to move from unresigned, to move from Edna St. Vincent Millay, I'm unresigned, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, to, okay, what choice do I have? So I think that Niebuhr's basic posture feels really wise. It's just not anything I've ever been able to do. But it also calls to my mind the teaching. It's from one of the Hasidic masters. It's in our Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat Sidur. There's nothing so whole as a broken heart. And I think that whole teaching, there's nothing so whole as a broken heart, speaks to somebody who's in the process of making progress and who's trying to do some internal work to get through the day. Colleagues, have you ever said this prayer? Would you ever say this prayer?
Can you say it in Hebrew?
Uh,
No. I
Yes.
thought you were going to do the Hasidic one.
no, the Serenity Prayer. Have you ever said the Serenity Prayer? Would you ever say the Serenity Prayer?
I mean, me personally, I have many moments in my life that I don't say exactly those words, but I said many things like that. But then, it's hard. It's hard because, again, the following week, I'm thinking again about, really I have to let it go. No, maybe I can do something to change it. So it's complicated.
I haven't said this prayer, but looking at it, the second line really strikes me also, because I think there are things in my life.
Courage to change the things that you can.
Courage. I think there are things in my life, in many people's lives, where they wholeheartedly believe that change is necessary, but can't find the courage to step into the fray. Very difficult.
Michelle?
I love this prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. As I said before, it has inspired millions around the world. I mean, this prayer is responsible for so much healing and so much hope. And it's, for me, these are not the first words that I reach out to, but I see a lot of wisdom in them.
Yeah, and a little bit what you were saying, we've been praying pretty much every Shabbat since October 7th. They pray for the IDF every day, pray for the hostages. Does it make a difference in the result, in the outcome in the world? Perhaps not, but it makes us feel better. So perhaps also the mission of this prayer is that.
Yeah, although I mean, I have a question, right? Arguably, one would want for King David to find some serenity in his mourning after some time, and one would want for Daedalus to find peace. But to be realistic, they're parents who have lost their children. There's a level in which their lives have been forever altered. And serenity is not exactly the right
Yeah.
word. Maybe agency, right? Maybe what meaning do I give? Danny Gordis sent out this morning a beautiful piece about parents who had lost their daughter who had wanted to be a therapist in Israel, and they've just opened a center in her name where they are healing people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's a lot of people in Israel right now, and finding a way to make a difference in this world in the face of all of that loss and trauma and tragedy.
So, Michelle, it feels so obviously right that people who have certainly experienced losses like King David and Daedalus and the parents who lost kids on October 7th, that just serenity is not on the menu. So my question, I just want to close with this question. Why call a prayer the serenity prayer when so often serenity is not on the menu? And in fact, I mean, like a Jewish insight here is that we don't say go in peace until somebody is dead. That's what you say, lech bishalom, go in peace. Now you're dead, you can finally be at peace. While you're alive, you never say go in peace. You say lech lishalom, go towards peace. But who's ever centered, peaceful, anchored, serene? I always wonder, is it just me? I'm a head case. I can never get to peace. I can never get to serene. Why call a prayer the serenity prayer when serenity is so hard for so many?
Maybe we should do Lech Le Serenity.
I actually always thought it was kind of like our Torah portions. You just call it the first thing out of the gate.
No, I disagree. I think that one of the main purposes of prayer is to find hope and to find a mission. And by calling it the Serenity Prayer, it's saying that there's a mission that we need to try to get to, and it's elusive, and this is therefore maybe many of us never are able to attain it, but it's something that that we have to work towards. It's
keep reaching.
Keep reaching. Yeah.
Keep reaching. Well, dear colleagues and friends, and dear friends who are watching online, on this upcoming high holidays, may we reach for serenity, may we reach for courage, may we reach for discernment and wisdom, and may we sometimes even find it. Shabbat shalom.
Amen.
Amen.